Welcome, 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 everyone. We'll give folks another minute or so to join. We've got some people still welcoming into the waiting room here, but thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Give it another 30 seconds or so. Lovely to see you all in this virtual space with us. Got some people joining. Lovely faces. We've got an iPhone. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I'm happy you're here too. Hi, Molly. We are going to go ahead and get started. Bonjour and welcome to the Black History Month Roundtable virtual panel discussion. Bind again, come on in, welcome and join us. Thank you to the attendees for joining in this virtual space. We are glad that you chose to be here this afternoon. We have an excellent lineup here full of wonderful, brilliant humans, really inspiring Black leaders in Minnesota who today will discuss leadership, community, and their perspective on We Are Living Black History, our journey to leadership. I'm Ashley Charwood. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I have the lucky honor of facilitating this roundtable conversation. We are recording this event. If you do not want to be recorded, I'd invite you to change your name and end the video recording. And to do that, you can click on the video camera icon, which will stop the video of you, where then only your name or your image will show. Also, to change your name, you can go to your little Brady Bunch box. There'll be a couple of dots and you can edit your name. Everyone has been muted upon entering this virtual space, and I'd welcome you to keep yourself muted by ensuring that the little microphone icon at the bottom or top of your screen, making sure that that microphone icon has a red diagonal line through it. That means that you're muted. That way we won't pick up any extra background noise. We're going to go ahead and get started with a land acknowledgement. So if you are joining us from anywhere on Turtle Island, anywhere on what is now the United States of America, it is important to acknowledge that your feet, your body is on Indigenous land. And it's important to acknowledge that something happened and that something continues to happen here, and that Indigenous people are still here, surviving and thriving. I know many of you are joining from Bemidji or Bemidji State University. And so we acknowledge that Bemidji State University is located on land and water that is the current and ancestral homeland of the Ojibwe and Dakota. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide, forced assimilation, and efforts to alienate the Indigenous inhabitants from their territory here. We honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people still connected to this land, retained tribal sovereignty, treaty rights, and cultural resilience. Indigenous people are the spiritual and physical caretakers of this land to which we all belong. Bemidji State University respects these sacred lands, stands with the community members from these nations, and will fight injustice in all its forms. Please take a moment to reflect on the Indigenous community members, our friends, relatives, and neighbors. Miigwech for holding that space, folks. Again, I want to thank you for joining this event. There have been some amazing sponsors of this event that need to be thanked and loved on and appreciated. So this event would not be what it is without the sponsorship, funding, and support of quite a few organizations. So Support Within Reach, the Sexual Violence Resource Center, Evergreen Youth and Family Services, MNCASA, the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault, SVC, the Sexual Violence Center, and the Bemidji State University and Northwest Technical College Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Also, what did y'all think of those amazing flyers? Come on now, thumbs up, right? So the artwork and the social media package for this event was created by Susan Perry, who was the graphic designer, and Stephen Gonzalez, who was the digital media animator. And both of these artists have a critical focus on DEI work, Please check them out on Instagram at Susan Perry Design, all one word, and at gonzalez.animations, or do a quick Google search of Stephen Gonzalez Animations and Susan Perry Design. Please give all the sponsors and key supporters a virtual round of applause by showing us your claps or your snaps, and or by clicking the reaction icon down at the bottom and giving us that clapping icon or that clapping emoji. Let's go ahead and applaud their dedication to this important event. Oh yeah, I see a couple of claps there. Thanks for that. All right, now we have some very insightful, lovely, wise panelists that are going to be speaking on this roundtable today. And I've received great community feedback from community members that are excited to hear from these panelists, and I echo your excitement. There are 6 panelists this afternoon who are going to be part of this roundtable conversation. We have the brilliant Ebony Warren, who is the Executive Director at Evergreen Youth and Family Services of Bemidji. The lovely Evette Ellis, Executive Director of Support Within Reach, also out of Bemidji. The talented Dr. Gabriel Warren, Associate Professor of Business Administration from Bemidji State University. Kenosha Davenport is in the virtual house today and is an amazing person joining us from SVC, the Sexual Violence Center. We've got the fabulous Artika C who is here from the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And Stephen D. Parker is here, who has just done an amazing, fantastic job in his role as Bemidji State University's Campus Diversity Officer and Title V Coordinator. Please join me in giving them a welcome by using the reaction icon to clap and cheer them on. Yes, I see those snaps and claps. So I'm so pumped up about this conversation, a little bit nervous too, to be honest. But as we begin this panel portion, I would invite the audience to put any questions in the chat. Myself and other members of the panel will continue to monitor the chat as best as we can, and bring forth questions throughout and at the end of the roundtable conversation. We will set aside time at the end for some additional Q&A. I also want to let you know in advance to expect non-closure with this conversation, as this is the start of many conversations to be had. And it's not going to be a box that we can check off. There might be some questions that we won't get to. You might leave perhaps even with more questions. And so just know that we'll try to get to as much as we can, but expect some non-closure. We also plan to finish up this conversation by 3 this afternoon. All right, are you all ready? Audience, panelists. All right, so I'll get the roundtable conversation flowing here with the first question. And in thinking of the title of today's event, we are living Black history, our journey to leadership. Can you each share pieces of your background, such as if you're from Minnesota, how you wound up in Minnesota, and how you got into your current position? Let's start with Kenosha and Artika.
Oh, she said your name first, Kenosha.
Okay. So I hail from Alabama, I'm born and raised Southern girl. I came here to be the executive director of the Sexual Violence Center. I've been in the movements to end gender-based violence for more than 19 years. And so I've done this work in other states such as North Carolina, West Virginia, Alabama, and now Minnesota. And also the fact that Minnesota has more than 10,000 lakes is also exciting for me too as well. So then I'll toss this back to Artika.
Thank you, Kenosha. I'm Artika Roller, the Executive Director of the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And I think I am the only one on the panel that is from Minnesota. I was raised in the Summit University District in St. Paul, and within the Black community known as the Rondo neighborhood that unfortunately was destroyed when I-94 went through the Rondo neighborhood. I've been working in the field of anti-violence and specifically gender-based violence for nearly 20 years with a focus specifically on sex trafficking, did some family well-being work. I've been involved with a lot of the intimate partner domestic violence work, and currently my focus is on sexual assault, sexual violence. And the question was, how did I get to this position? I think around 2018, 2019, in my community, there was a call for Black women to run for political office. And I quickly dismissed that. I was like, yeah, that's not for me. But I did know that I could lead in this field of work and was excited to do it. So I answered that calling by applying for this position as executive director when it became available. But my entire career really has been centered and focused on the needs of Black women and family and creating access and eliminating barriers.
Awesome. That's so amazing. And I'm glad that you brought the Rondo neighborhood into this space and into this discussion. For folks on the call, definitely do a Google search and learn a little bit more about that. But yeah, we've got Alabama in the house, and I was born in Georgia, but I also grew up in Minnesota. So we've got that Minnesota connection there. And Kenosha, did you want to add anything additional to your response?
Yes, because I was thinking that you said, how do we get to Minnesota, right? But how I came in a leadership position, I began this work more than 19 years ago as an on-call shelter relief person, which they would call when nobody wanted to work the holidays. And so I soon realized that this work was my passion. And so I began to learn more about how to be an advocate and really began to set my sights on leadership opportunities. But then I soon began to realize, like most nonprofits are, that our nonprofit organization at the time was very, flat as far as like upward trajectory. And so once I became the volunteer coordinator, then went on to be the rape response coordinator, then I began to set my sight on leadership position, but I had a relatively young executive director. So I knew that my opportunities would be outside of my organization. And one of the great things that my executive director did at the time, she would always forward job announcements to staff. And so when that ED position came available, I was like, yeah, I think now's the time, because she wasn't leaving and my supervisor wasn't leaving, because one day I walked up on her in the break room and she's asking HR, how can I collect my Social Security and work here? So I was like, oh, she's never leaving here. So I began to set my sights outwardly. And so the opportunity came when I began this work in Cullman, Alabama, which just has its own unique history. It was a sundown town, and some like to think that it's still one of those sunset towns, right? And so they decided to bring me on there. And so I spent my first 4 years in leadership there in Cullman, Alabama. And now I'm here in Minnesota. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you both. I'm so glad that you're on this panel, and I'm looking forward to our future questions where we can dive deeper into your leadership journey. And Kenosha and Artika, you have definitely led the way for people in your communities. The work you each do is so impactful, not just in the communities where you're at, but even regionally. I worked 5 years at the Bemidji Battered Women's Shelter, and the work that you all are doing to raise awareness about gender-based violence is so important, so imperative. And Minnesota, the state, is lucky that you're both here. Let's go to Ebony and Gabriel. Can you share a little bit about what brought you to Minnesota and your leadership journey? Ebony, you're
Are
mute.
you going to go first, Gabe?
There you go. I was going to paper, rock, scissors, but yeah, who wants to go first? Let's go, Ebony.
Yeah. So, of course, like Ashley said, I am Ebony Warren, Executive Director of Evergreen Youth and Family Services. I am originally from South Carolina, tiny town near Charleston called St. Stephen's. I grew up in the Alvin community around tons of family. My family still lives there now. It was amazing. For me, my journey to leadership has been pretty non-traditional. I actually got my bachelor's and master's in sport administration. And my goal at the time in college was to become an athletic director and AD. And so I just switched vowels. I just decided to be an ED instead of an AD, right? But my journey here, it has been up and down and exciting. We moved from Alabama. Gabriel's my husband. Most of you guys probably have an idea about that. But we lived in Alabama for about 12 years and started our family there. And my husband got a job at Bemidji State University, go Bees. And so we traveled up to the true north. And so me being a wife, a spouse who is following, her husband's trajectory, I came to Bemidji and I said, okay, how do I get involved in the community? And I just started by going into the schools, volunteering, following my kids mostly, and got an opportunity to mentor students in the school system here. And a job came open for me to work with a program. It was called Students First. So I worked there as a strengths educator, and then eventually ended up getting an opportunity to direct that program as well. Due to, financial constraints, the program was cut from our school district. So I was then left with an opportunity to see how I can continue to make an impact in the community, and Evergreen's opportunity came for me to apply. So I did that, and it was just a natural transition for me to move from working with a program with hundreds of students, working with mentoring students, and just really caring about the life of young people, to transitioning into leading Evergreen. And at Evergreen, we work with youth who are experiencing homelessness and families in crisis, and we try to wrap around them. So it was kind of a natural progression for me to be here, and I'm excited about it.
We are excited that you are here, Ebony. Got South Carolina in the house too. So let's just shout out to those original places. I think there's definitely many parallels between leading athletes to then leading staff and leading organizations. I can see the similarities and the connections. How about Gabriel?
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited to see the participation on the Zoom here. Just a little bit about myself. Ebony kind of told you most of it, but I'm originally from Alabama, so born and raised, lived there my whole life until August of 2017 when we moved here. My journey to leadership was a little bit different as well. I ended up, after graduating from undergrad, I went to the University of Alabama, so I am a big Crimson Tide fan. I was a student athlete there. And when I graduated, I actually went and worked in the business industry for about 12 years. So that's where I first kind of got my introduction to business, and out of that, leadership. When I was working in retail, I became an assistant manager. I think it was around 2012. And that was kind of my introduction to corporate leadership. And then I kind of moved around to different positions as sales managers and things like that. And after going to work for 12 years, I was not necessarily as satisfied as I wanted to be. So I decided to go back to school and complete my graduate work while I was still working full time. And I finished up in 2016 with my doctorate. And then at that point, I transitioned into full-time higher ed. And that was my first full-time position as a higher education leader. I was a program director for a university down in Southern Alabama. And it introduced me to some things, and I realized that I wanted to be in that space full-time. And then I actually, getting in the position I am in now was based off of networking. I actually met a professor who was at a conference in Orlando, and we were talking, and I was trying to find out about her journey. And she told me that there was a couple of retirements happening here at BSU. And that night I went to the hotel and applied, and, like they say, the rest is history. And that's how I ended up getting here. So I've been enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to just trying to figure out, more ways we can get involved in the community. So I'm just excited to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing a little bit more about your leadership journey, sprinkling some nuggets in there about the importance of networking, sharing a little bit more about your doctoral journey too. Hashtag goals. I'm going to be trying to get mine pretty soon too. So I'm going to be hitting you up for some advice, I think, in the near future. Thank you both for sharing your experience with leadership and a little bit more about your journey. I'm going to open it up now to Evette and Stephen.
All right, awesome. So Stephen in the chat, he gave me the go to go first, so I don't mind. But hi, everybody. My name is Evette Ellis. My journey to leadership. It was, I tried to start it out traditional, straight out of high school, go to college. I did that. But yeah, along the line, I wind up becoming a mother, so it tacked on some, some barriers there. But while I was in school, I had a lot of opportunities being in supervisory position. And I don't ever want to discount, those entry-level positions. Like Taco Bell, that's where I started, that was my first ever true supervisory role. I learned the greatest customer service there. But through that, I'm actually born and raised Arizona, very small town, Coolidge, Arizona, population, you can count probably on your hands. But yeah, with that, I got into tribal social services, working specifically with youth and families that were, victims of various different traumas, and just kind of really worked my way up. It was actually introduced to me in college. I was trying to get out of the corrections field there, in our small town, there's, either you go work in corrections or you become an inmate or something, but no, I worked there for a little bit. And then my best friend actually introduced me to the tribal community. And so I had it in there, and I just kind of really worked my way up, all the way up as high as I could go, which would be the administrator, working as youth service coordinator, and just continued my educational path. And I think when you work in one space for so long, being in that industry for 14 years, for me, I needed to kind of learn other tools, put other things under my belt. So I did go and work, with in the psychiatric hospital, some behavioral health, case management. And then, I just continued my education there and just really got well-rounded knowledge. And everything always brought me back to that helping field of really wanting to work with youth, work with families, work with people. And so as I took that big leap of faith, I just kind of spin the globe, I was like, okay, where am I going to apply at? Where am I going to apply? And I had two options. Okay, go work in England or go work in Bemidji. I've never heard of Bemidji. And this is in the midst of the pandemic. And so I'm like, okay, if I go to England, I may get stuck there because everything was just kind of up in the air. So I made the executive decision in 2021, January 2021, to become the executive director for Support Within Reach. And so I'm from a very small community, so I'm okay with the trees and everything, the isolation, everything is pretty interesting. But the work is pretty, it's the same, the work is the same. There's still that population that needs to be serviced, that needs, to get the support that you're providing. So that gave me a great opportunity to kind of learn Bemidji, learn Minnesota. And with that, I've been there for over a year now. So that's been pretty awesome. I haven't ran off yet. So I'm still there. I like it. I think it was one of the greatest decisions I could have ever made. But yeah, so just kind of worked my way up, and through the midst of that, and by the fourth kid, I kind of made my decision that, okay, I can start, focusing on my career path and my career goals, and just kind of stepping outside of that box and do bigger things. And with that, I think once you get in a leadership role, it's hard not to ever go back to go backwards. You always know you want to help people, but being a leader or being an executive director, you always kind of see things from such a larger perspective. So I think that's what brought me here. I'll hand it over to Stephen. So I'll talk your head off.
That's love. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephen D. Parker. My pronouns are he, him, his, y'all. So I was born in Chicago, Illinois. And so immediately I understood my identity. I understood, some separation issues and some of those evident issues with our system, similar to many of my peers. And so, I say that to say that kind of fueled me. That kind of fueled me to start asking questions to my mother and to some elders, asking some questions, right? Like, why can't we get on the bus? And why did someone touch my hair? And why did they say I look, handsome for a Black boy, right? And so I asked those questions, and I saw my mother have some real, what we call today, some courageous conversations, which were just very normal conversations to me and my siblings. I'm at a young age, y'all. Part of my life also as a youth was spent not from Chicago, but from a small little place called Beloit, Wisconsin. So Ashley, we got Wisconsin and Illinois in the house over here too, amongst all these other beautiful places. But partially growing up in Wisconsin, I was able to see truly at a very micro level, right? Some of these microaggressions and some of these things that we hadn't even really coined yet or termed yet, or wasn't really brought out into the world and discussed. And so I was able to kind of see some of those things and ask some of those critical questions as a youth. And that really is what pushed me to study social work, right? So I am a social worker. That's my core to my identity. And that was actually my first entryway into Minnesota. So I am a Husky alum with my first degree. I am a Husky. I joined Gabriel as a collegiate athlete. And so that was where I was first introduced to Minnesota, and Minnesota nice, y'all. I was really informed by that. That experience was very transformative for me. And during that time, I worked in mental health and DEIA plus work, and really trying to really build a portfolio of advocacy. Right? That was a goal of mine, and I felt like that's what I was called to do. And from there, it just kind of spiraled out, right? So I went to Colorado and studied and really worked in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I remember sitting, if you're from St. Cloud, y'all can give me a little thumbs up, or if you attended St. Cloud State or anything, but I resided in a residence hall called Shoemaker Hall. And Shoemaker Hall, I had a roommate. He was from a place called Coon Rapids. So I already had my reservations, okay? Coming from Chicago, I already had my reservations. He said he was from Coon Rapids, he was proud of it. So I started already thinking critically. And when I went through some of my social work courses, I began to think deeper. And I said, I am in love with mental health. And I realized that my mother, myself, my siblings, my peers, we are having adverse reactions to very white spaces where we're not at. And if I'm going to do this work, I might want to pair up this social work with some type of system of oppression, some type of system that perpetuates, right, disparities and oppression. So I decided that I was not going to do the Evette. I wasn't going to criminal justice. I was a little scared over there. I decided to match up social work, specifically, right, mental health and health in general, that helper field, with education. And I married those both to become an executive, right? An executive administrator at Bemidji State University and Northwest Technical College. Y'all, I have lived in some very rural spaces. I don't know if I could count the people on one hand like some of my panelists today, y'all. But Bemidji called me based on us being in the metro of American Indian brothers and sisters and non-binary humans, right? And the work that we're able to do to elevate this very critical population to our nation. And so that's part of my calling here, y'all, to be a very much, be a transformative and a transdisciplinary leader in education. Let's dismantle some systems, right? Like that's really, I align with Artika actually in that sense of saying, nah, I got a mission. I gotta go. We got some work to do. And so that's what called me to education and mental health, right? And to Minnesota.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you all so much. See, aren't these humans amazing on this panel? So we've got Illinois, Arizona, Wisconsin, England, or Bemidji, but hey, you all are you're still here. And nobody's leadership is the same. There's not a specific path. And so I really appreciate you sharing just the diversity amongst your experiences. And about the helping field, I think it was Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, who said, find the helpers. There's a lot of chaos going on in the world, but find the helpers. And each of you on this panel, you are the helpers. So thank you for being you. I see you, I appreciate you. And also being from Northern Minnesota, you know, Evette, Gabriel, Ebony, Stephen, I am thrilled that you are all in Bemidji. I'm appreciative of all of the ways that you're bringing your perspectives to the Bemidji and greater Minnesota communities. I want to pause and take a moment to remind folks in the virtual space here to put some questions in the chat. I will do my best to keep an eye on the chat, but if you have any questions for the panelists, definitely put those in the chat and I'll make sure to try to read those in this space. So feel free to do that as I move on to the next question, and I'll again keep my eye on the chat here. So for the next kind of question that I want to ask, I'm going to start with Evette. What are some of the trends that you've witnessed as it relates to people of color in the workplace or in leadership roles?
Okay, so for me, honestly, you don't really see a lot. And when you see some diversity in those spaces, it's like, wow, you know, like you really want to know how they got into those fields. You know, was it somebody giving you an in or whatever? You don't see a lot of people that are relatable in those spaces. But for myself, I think more so, I think it's like the people that take the steps to, you know, be seekers, you know, people that are looking for, you know, just something different, the ones that are going out there and asking for help or asking, you know, just being curious. You know, you get into those spaces where normally you'd probably be deterred, you know, like where you wouldn't necessarily want to be in those spaces. So I think it kind of minimizes or it creates apprehension for people, especially people of color, to reach out for those services or supports, especially in communities that are more rural, where you don't have a lot of people of color up in those higher spaces that kind of can be more relatable or understanding of those dynamics.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that too. In predominantly white spaces in Northern Minnesota, you kind of wonder, okay, how did you get here? And it's deeper than diversity. It's like, okay, we're diversifying it, but do people feel like they genuinely belong within those spaces? We've got a panel, or we've got a question from the chat here. I'm going to try to sprinkle in. So first of all, someone says, good for you, Evette. I think it's incredibly difficult to start a new executive director role in the middle of a pandemic in a new community. So they're giving you some kudos and some love there. And they know some EDs who have run kicking and screaming from the field. So giving you some props there. The panel question is, what's most important to you in helping you have a sense of belonging in white majority organizations? So I'll open it up to you all to kind of reflect on that. Think about some of the trends that you're seeing, and then also think about what's important in helping people have a sense of belonging in those spaces. And Gabriel, you unmuted, so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll start real quick, and I'll try to address the first question you had and then this one too. But I think some trends that I've noticed just really over the past few years is that there are, kind of like Evette was saying, there's not a lot of Blacks in leadership positions like the ones that some of us are in. And I think that trend is changing a little bit. I have noticed just through like social media, like on my LinkedIn pages and things like that, I'm seeing more people of color getting into those senior level leadership roles. And I think some of that honestly has been because of the things that have happened recently with George Floyd and all of the other people that have been going through these various traumas. And I think that has created more awareness and let people understand that there is value in a diversity of perspective and individuals and things like that. So what's most important to me in helping me to have a sense of belonging in majority white organizations, I think the biggest thing for me is just acceptance. I think acceptance is really important. because oftentimes if you're in a space and you're like one of the only people or one of two or whatever, and you don't feel like you're being accepted or that sense of community and belonging, then oftentimes you do start to feel a little more isolated, and you feel like people don't trust you or things like that. And if it's not a welcoming environment, then more than likely you'll probably end up looking to move and leave the space that you're in. So I think the biggest thing for me is having that sense of community and people understanding that, yes, we may have different skin tones, but I have a lot of similarity to some other people. I want my family to be safe. I want my kids to be able to go to good schools. I want to be able to enjoy things without feeling like I'm being watched or, things like that. So I think those things we all can say that we want. So just understanding that and accepting the fact that even though we have those physical differences, we are still human. So I think that's where I would end it at right there.
And I would be happy to add to that. One of the other things that I would say is being heard, not just listened to, but being heard. So often I know a thing is a thing, right? And then I'm being questioned on, is that my reality? And one thing that I know for sure every single day is that I am a Black woman. And I know what that experience feels like because I've done so 43 years, go soon to be 44, super excited about that. But I know a thing when I see a thing. And so when I am sharing with you what may be my, and I'm defining it as racism or some force type of discrimination, to have white peers or supposed allies saying, oh, maybe you're overthinking it. Nope, I've experienced this enough in my lifetime to know it's a thing when I say that it's a thing. So knowing and hearing your staff when they say that, hey, when this happens in the workplace, it does not feel good, it does not feel nice, that you take some action. Not like, how can you learn to sit with that or live with that? No, it's a thing and it needs to be eradicated. And so it starts by you listening.
Yes, so acceptance, genuinely being heard. So sometimes healing can be medicine. If you're fully feeling heard, that can be medicine in and of itself. And Artika, I noticed you were doing some head nods as Kenosha was speaking. Do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, definitely. One of the things that I see as a trend, I'll start with that, is that organizations and people are really rethinking their diversity and inclusion strategies. And so I think that is one of the trends that I've seen, that it's become a priority. But on the other side, as Kenosha was mentioning, it is important to look beyond tokenism, not just having people that look diverse, but we're thinking about diversity in thought, diversity in strategy as well. I think when I was hired, my board didn't understand what it meant to have a Black woman in leadership and what type of support that they would have to offer, and that I would need to do my job and do my job well. And so when I'm nodding with Kenosha, because we work closely together, I really I agree with her wholeheartedly that when we're, what I need not only is to be listened to, but to be seen, but to be also supportive and doing the work outside. One of our strategic directions is bold and courageous. So outside of what you would have normally done, I think what we say sometimes is that when you do what you've always done, you will get what you always get. And I need people not to do what they've always done. I need them to do something bold and courageous so we can actually get what we are saying we want or need in our organization related to having a diverse staff or team or leadership within our organizations.
So, so true about looking beyond, tokenism. We're not just having one person here that's going to be the know-all, the be-all, the go-to. So thinking deeper, being bold and courageous. And there's a message here in the chat about Gabriel, that your presence on social media is such an uplifting force for good and moving forward. I love being connected to you. And that's part of what Artika is saying, is being bold and courageous, even with your Facebook posts. We have the capacity to be bold and make those changes organizationally and systemically. Now, speaking of organization and systemic change, Stephen, Ebony? Ebony,
Yeah.
you want to speak to that?
I'll hop in. I think some of the trends that I've been seeing is that organizations are being more intentionality when thinking about hiring and thinking about diversifying their board, much like, some of the panelists have said, and also in listening to these people once they are hired and really trying to seek to understand some of the things that people of color are experiencing, even in leadership, even on frontline staff members. Like, I think a trend that is really, really good that's happening is that people are listening and being intentional. And when thinking about how to make you feel supported and to feel a part of the community in predominantly white organizations, I think relationship building is so key. And that doesn't look like, you being best friends with everyone and going over to dinner at everyone's home that you work with, but it is creating a relationship in your organizations, at your job, where people can be themselves, where you're open to asking questions, and you're open to just building the relationships with everyone from top down. And that looks different depending on the roles that you have, depending on, what you're doing at any given moment, but just being intentional again about building those relationships. I think that helps people to be more comfortable, to feel wanted, and to make them feel like they're a part.
You had Ebony, I'm with you. I'm with all of y'all. I'm seeing things in the chat, you all, and just know, like, I welcome folks to add in, right? You got us before you to share our insights and our loving on y'all and experiences, but please add in on there. I know folks got great ideas. That's a critical question to me. That's a critical question right there, right? As you begin to think about minorities in organizations that are historically and predominantly white, that's a critical question. That's life or death. We talking about putting minorities in spaces where they have to actually engage to change systems and or code switch. We talking about a biological, psychological, sociological that will impact their cultural realities. That's real. So the sense of belonging to me is critical. That's critical. How long can you maintain as a minority, specifically a Black human? And I'm gonna talk about being a Black man in a predominantly white space. That's harmful. If I was going to give some advice on this regarding what are the critical, or I would call crucial needs for sense of belonging in advancing society as a whole, right? So we can heal as well as become more inclusive. Y'all, I'd name a couple of things, a few things. I say we need authenticity in spaces. I say we need transparency in organizational spaces, right? And all of this ties into the willingness to name, identify, and address matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion, anti-racism, social justice, and other isms. Like, we got work to do, right? And so we may not have the resources, but we got the humans. The humans are the resources, right? Individualistically, at the micro, meso, and macro levels, there's work to be done in all of those areas, in my opinion. And so, I see in organizations where it's like, well, we don't have the bandwidth. No. Each individual have a space on this spectrum, right? And so I see it as what I call an allyship plus spectrum. An allyship plus spectrum. If you work with me at Bemidji State University or Northwest Technical College or any other place I've worked over the, over the years, here's the reality. You can deem yourself as an ally, that's cool. But I want to get deeper. I want to get to some of the roots. Are you an associate to your allyship? Are you an assistant to your allyship? Are you a co-conspirator, right? Are you a co-conspirator? Are you conspiring with me to really make a better place for all folks and also to allow voices that are marginalized and minoritized to be heard? Like, there's work to be done, right? Like, what is your identity as an institution? And that's on all of those levels. So for me, it's crucial, y'all, because we don't see folks in certain spaces, predominantly white and historically white spaces, because it's draining, it's exhausting, not only on the physiological aspect, but the psychological aspect. And so for me, I think there's many different pieces to this, and we got to address them all. And I think specifically in organizational institutions that were created from their genesis to oppress, such as education, particularly higher education, right? Exclusionary, right? In its development since Harvard, right? So that's my opinion, y'all, as it relates to, that critical question of, a sense of belonging, right? That's a part of it. And there's a lot of work to be done to get there.
Thank you for that. Just dropping gems upon gems, all of you. Authenticity, transparency, intentionality, moving it beyond hiring, relationship building, doing all of these things to show up as your genuine and authentic self. And at the same time, acknowledging that sometimes that can be draining and exhausting. And to connect to the question here in the chat, for those of you that have experienced that tokenism in the workplace, how have you combated that? Because the organization loses a lot when people can't show up as their genuine and authentic self. They lose out on different perspectives and experiences, great ideas and opportunities for growth. So in asking this question from Kiki here in the chat, how have you all combated that tokenism in the workplace? Do you have any strategies that you've used to show up as your genuine, authentic self?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll start that answer. For myself, especially coming into an ED position in the midst of COVID, having to come to a space where you are the only person, but also being in that leadership role to make that change. We're making the decisions to work with our staff, and it's a task. Introducing these different, maybe uncomfortable topics, especially because we're working with the community. And in doing so, there's different approaches that maybe haven't been introduced, but being in my space, I feel like sometimes we're the spokespeople, for being Black or whatever. And so it's important for us to, set that tone. It's like they say, give 100% to your job, but on top of that, we carry on our shoulders that representation. So we have to ensure that we're modeling these behaviors, that we're putting forth those efforts, and just not just saying that, oh, we're going to do this or we're going to have this one thing, but making it every day, purposeful interactions with your staff. So that way you introduce what you're wanting to change, and you start making a plan and put it, make it like push forward with that.
Hey, I want to add something to what Evette was saying too. I think part of it is speaking up. I think in my career, I have learned the importance of speaking up. Earlier in my career, I probably wouldn't be as vocal. If I felt like I was the tokenized individual at the organization, I would just try to keep my head down, do the work that I've been hired to do, and not necessarily try to step on any toes. Well, I've learned to embrace the journey that I'm on and to embrace the role that I have been given. And I think sometimes that looks like speaking up and letting people know that, hey, I don't want to be the one person of color that's, doing all of these various roles and pretty much kind of like working my finger to the bone because I'm trying to prove my worth or my value or whatever to the organization. And I think having that mindset and being courageous enough to let others know, like, hey, I would love to be a part of this, whatever it is you're doing, but I just don't have the capacity to do it at this moment. And being okay with that, because one thing that I've realized is I have watched in various companies, the people of color who are in leadership roles working what seems like 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times harder than some of our other colleagues who are not of color. But we are afraid to speak up because we feel like we're going to be outcast or whatever. So I just think being willing to speak up and being willing to do it in a respectful way, but let others know that, hey, I am not able to do all of these things and someone else has to pick it up from where I am. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, more great advice about how speaking up and speaking out it's imperative, and to challenge the old notion of we've always done it this way, or this is just how we do things around here, but to really say there's some things here that can be changed. And another thing, Gabriel, that you had shared is it's okay with saying not yet, or with saying no. And even with saying that without apologizing, which of course I need to take my own advice here, but to have good balance, and we don't always have to say yes and be the go all be all for everyone. So good advice there. And what you were both speaking of connects to a question in the chat along those same lines of why and how is it important to show up in community? Why is it important to speak truth to power?
I'll jump in, Ashley. It's important to show up and to be a representative for your community, because there's some people who won't get there. There's some people who don't know the direction to take to even get there. So you being there and being a representation for them, it gives them something to aspire to. You can be a voice for other people who don't have a voice or don't realize they do have a voice, who may not have the courage to speak up. You get an opportunity to not just show them, hey, this can be you, but this is how you can do it. This is how you can work across, gender, across racial lines. This is how you can come in and be, excellent at what you do, and how you can come and serve others, and, just show that, hey, I'm here, and I'm here to not only just be this, as we talked about before, this, token, but I'm here to be a part of what's happening. So showing up and being present is really important. We talk to our kids a lot about having that seat, and it's not that you want a seat at the table just because you want your name in lights or because you feel like you know everything to do, but having a seat means that you get an opportunity to bring with you the experience you have, the knowledge you have, and then others who will never be in that seat, they get to come along with you for the ride, and they can be encouraged, and they can learn, and they can grow from your experiences too. So yeah, definitely, showing up is really important, especially for people that, look like me and that look like somebody.
Yes, it's that idea of make space, take space too. Like taking up space, being okay with taking up space that you're bringing, and then also making space, inviting people to those decision-making tables. And I know a lot of you on this call are on other boards in the community. And so I want to take a moment to just thank you for your board service about standing up, speaking up, trying to make those impactful decisions organizationally. And you all are doing your part already by showing up, stepping up, opening up doors, leading the way, which leads me to another question. And yeah, please keep adding questions and more comments to the chat. All of this could be a full day conversation to really dive deep. And so we're scratching somewhat of the surface here. So use the chat to, if you want to elevate what somebody said, if you want to echo what someone said, put that in the chat too. We're definitely watching that, and other people are seeing that too. But again, you all are showing up, stepping up, leading the way. What opportunities have you created within your work as far as new programs, new capacity building of the people that you're working with? How have you created new opportunities?
Happy to start with that one. One of the things, as a Black woman in a leadership position, one of the things that I try to do is continue to open the doors for others. It's not enough for me to be the first of, right? The first ever. It's like, how can I also hold the use my foot to open the door for others, you know, so I'm holding the door so that others may also come in. And what enables me to do that work is my partnership with Valor US, which is the coalition, the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And so I partner with them to teach up and coming, aspiring leaders in this movement that identify as individuals of color, to train them some of those what we call soft skills, like human resources, finances, and things like that, to ensure that when they're going out and looking for leadership opportunities, that they're able to say, yes, I have those skills. And so so often in our nonprofit sector, individuals of color are not looked at as, you know, potential candidates for executive directors roles. And so, and that's one of the things that I also made very clear to my board. Yes, I'll come and work for you. However, working with other individuals of color is a priority for me. And I will take time away from this work to do that work, because, and I said, but you do have the choice of not having me here. And that's your prerogative. But my prerogative is to set my priorities. And that's a priority that I'm committed to lifelong. And so I work with, and so that gives me the opportunity to open doors across the nation, as well as doing some intentional work with the New Jersey Coalition Against Domestic Violence, to work with their advocates of color to build leadership skills in them. Because a lot of time what the narrative is like those individuals, like we haven't met qualified candidates. And it's not that they haven't met qualified candidates, is that candidates often don't get the same opportunity to fill up as other candidates do. And so, yeah, I'll just stop there.
And I just want to add a little piece to that, especially being in a leadership role. It's really important to kind of work with the staff you do currently have, to teach them how to separate themselves from those unconscious biases, especially in those hiring practices. Because a lot of times, you know, you could look at anybody on this call right now and you will make just a judgment, a very unconscious judgment. But instead of doing that, you want to look at those qualifications and see, okay, is this person filling will they meet these qualifications? Take away what you personally feel about those individuals and give them those opportunities to learn, because not everybody comes into those different roles with having strengths in every category that you're hiring in. And so do you have opportunities where you can work with individuals and teach them the necessary skills to do better? Also, look at the body that you do have and see how you can push them up into spaces where they can get into those supervisory roles, or encourage them to get additional education, because that's how I got to where I'm at now, by other people encouraging me and pushing me in a direction that I didn't see for myself. And so now that I'm here, it's like, now I feel that it's my mission to continue to seek out and encourage other minorities to know that they have these same opportunities available to them. And, like one thing, like being in Rotary, growing up, I knew nothing about Rotary. I knew nothing about what that did or how it impacted community, but being a part of that, actually getting a seat at that table and being one of the only few minorities at that table, I have opportunities to bring in other individuals to be a part of some of these community things that are going on and to build those knowledge bases. So it's important for us to be comfortable and know that though we're in these spaces and that we do belong in those spaces. We belong there, but we also need to recruit other like individuals to take up some of that space as well. So, yeah.
I agree with everything Evette and Kenosha said. And I would say that one of the things that I do is making sure that I am taking time to serve on grant making committees, interview panels, things that that take time, and we don't always have the capacity, but that's how you provide access. I know that there has been several decisions made on grant making that would not have been made for culturally specific programs if I wasn't sitting at the table. I know that there have been people that have been hired, and I could see the panel talking themselves out of hiring that person of color. And without my leadership at the table, we would not have been able to make those type of hires. So extending yourself beyond your on your current role and trying to find those opportunities to sit on different panels and on different committees. And yes, it does take a lot, because sometimes you are the only person representing your community on those panels, and you have to navigate those microaggressions. Sometimes they're macro aggressions when they're presented to you, but it's necessary in order to provide those opportunities. And then lastly, I would say one of the specific groups I'm working on is the Task Force for Murdered and Missing African-American Women. And this is the first task force in the nation to address crimes against Black women, and having the opportunity to sit on that panel and talk about strategies, and not alone strategies, but funding opportunities to get the resources to the communities that's needed, is really part of our leadership or calling when you're in a specific leadership role.
Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing your perspectives on that. And yeah, Artika, you have a voice, let it be heard, to really elevate that and take that space. And some of the other pieces you all had shared was creating opportunities for learning, whether it's about bias training or whether it's about understanding microaggressions, macroaggressions, building and noticing the leadership and potential in other people. I heard sitting on hiring committees, taking up space there, letting people know your voice, your views, and also lifting as you climb. Lifting as you climb. So Black history is to be acknowledged and celebrated, and it's Black History Month, and oftentimes I think we celebrate this all year round, but definitely in February, we want to really pay attention to this and elevate it. So although Black history shouldn't be seen in just the rear view mirror, because it's being created right now, like right now, this is history in progress, history in the making. And so what does being a Black or African-American in 2022 mean to you and the work? Let's hear from Stephen.
Let me tell you. Now, you called on me. Here's the deal. I think Blackness in 2022 for me, right? My Black body in this space, it's intersectionality of many things, right? And many feelings and many realities. I think as I tie this into the executiveness, our leadership roles, you find yourself engulfed with being a person who tries to educate and make lives matter. Make underrepresented, underserved, minoritized, marginalized folks matter. Identities matter. And that takes up a lot of my bandwidth. Thinking very critically about how to support folks, how to guide folks in their allyship, journey, and how to educate, inform folks. My Black identity really feels empowered at some times, and it also feels threatened at some times as a Black man, right? I point out, Amir down in Minneapolis. I point out the various killings that continue to happen, very much so in the state that we reside, right? And so my Blackness sometimes, specifically when I'm outside of these four walls within my office at BSU or NTC, feels threatened at times. But I will say my Black community and support, now that feels strong. Maybe not in my community in Bemidji, but I find it, all around. And so it's very much so searching and reminding myself of my Blackness in spaces where I am battling and deconstructing, predominantly whiteness. And so that's real. So sometimes it's liberating, sometimes it's scary. It's just a multiplicit space of feeling for me, being Black in 2021.
All the feels, all feelings are valid. How about Ebony? What does being Black in 2022 mean to you and this work?
Being Black means a lot. It means that I get an opportunity to be a light everywhere I go. I get an opportunity to be an example for my children, for my family. It means that I get an opportunity to open the door for others, as we've been talking about. I get a chance to mentor. I think in our community, sometimes mentorship is not something that we talk about often. So being Black today for me means that I have to even seek out, young people, young women who need to be mentored, who need someone to walk through life with them that looks like them, who can relate to them, who can encourage and yet challenge them to. I remember when I was in college, I had a mentor who, gosh, this lady, she's still so very dear to me. And she helped me track through my undergraduate, through my graduate. She really wrapped around me and opened doors for me. She gave me all of the support that I needed, and more support that I didn't even know I needed. Even today, if I needed to call her, I could call her and text her. She was there for me. She was a white woman. And I think often I'm so grateful for her, but I think often, there are other women like me, other young adults like me, other teenagers like me that look like me, who they want someone to mentor and to show them where to go. And that's great to get that from people from other cultures who don't look like you, but it's something amazing when you can look at somebody and share some experiences and still see them succeed, because you can see a reflection of yourself. So being Black to me in 2022 means that I can look in the mirror and see somebody else who needs to be able to see me.
That's beautiful. Definitely representation matters. Being able to see yourself and others is important, as is mentorship and seeking out people who have the skills and the experiences that you can truly learn from. And we're talking about, Black leadership, and just thinking about how it's soon to be March, which is, National Women's History Month or something like that. And so there are also a lot of women in these senior executive leadership roles. And so just want to echo and give you some snaps on the mentorship piece for sure. How about Artika, Evette? Do you have any comments on what it means to be Black in America? And then we have another question from Gabriel Warren that we'll get to after we hear from you two. Artika, Kenosha, Evette?
I'll go since I think I'm unmuted. Okay, yeah. So for me, it's like all of those feelings, I'm so happy, I'm overjoyed with being a Black woman in 2022. At the same time, I am terrified. I get terrified at times of the reality of our society at times, but the happiness of knowing where I've came from, to be able to mentor those people that don't see a way up because they're still looking down, helping to see somebody see my path as a Black woman, as a mother, as a, educated Black woman in leadership, doing these different things. It's like, I celebrate it daily. I love it. But at the same time, like I said, it's all of those feelings, because we still have to look at the realities of what happens around within the communities. And we have to walk in that. I'm a mother of a Black son, I'm a mother of Black daughters, and I have to educate them and teach them, the additional educational pieces behind what it truly means to be Black in 2022. how do we walk, how do we be safe, but also what those opportunities are for them. Because there's a lot of broken systems that we're stepping in and we're rebuilding, or we're replacing, or we're looking at the foundations, and we're at the tables making the differences. But we also, like, I don't know, there's a lot of emotions there, but I'm just happy to be who I am, to have my chocolate parents. You know, they are amazing. My grandpa, he just celebrated his 82nd birthday. So, you know, just to see the history from the stories of what they went through, especially being in that space where they picked the cotton, they did all these different things, but then to see me in my space, to see where I'm at, that in itself is amazing.
That's so deep. That is so deep. That's powerful. Bringing the ancestors into this conversation. Yes. So important to do that and to really elevate that. Sometimes that's what gets me through the days, to be honest. It's like, okay, the ancestors are with me here. So I appreciate you bringing them into the space with us. And yeah, it's not about this or that or either or. We can be both, and we can have complex feelings around our embracing our beautiful, bold Blackness. How about Artika, Kenosha? You want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to add to that. I'm going to borrow some earlier language from Artika. It allows me to be bold and courageous, you know, in the sense that I'm now at a place and age in my career where I can say bold and courageous things without fear of retaliation, because I know that the skills and talents that I have are valued, and I can take this show anywhere I need to take it, right? But it also means that I'm exhausted. In the year in which we had the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, and since then, countless other murders, right? I was being called upon to participate on various task force because I was a Black woman in leadership. And it got to the point that I just had to say, time out, Mayor such and such, while I am flattered, I'm also exhausted. So if you're just trying to collect my tears or my feelings or emotions, I'm not able to. So being able to set clear boundaries in this 2022, as I did in 21 and 20, is so crucial. It's like, I can't give you my emotional labor, A, for free, but B, when there's not going to be tangible action as a result. What are you going to do with this? I don't want to be a part of your think tank unless you can show me that you're going to take what I'm saying and make some action that goes beyond the election cycle, right? Not promises, because we as a community had enough of those, right? And we don't even want to talk about what those promises may look like to our Native brothers and sisters, right? Like we tired of promises. I need actions. And, you know, and then when people in our movement began to call, you know, because somebody said, and poor soul was like, check on your Black friends. And I was like, please don't check on me unless you got some action. Like, tell me, say how you doing, and this is what I'm doing as your ally, right? You know, I'm all about that tangible actions. I got enough people that I can do the emotional work with. And if I really want to process something emotionally, I'll call a therapist, right? I don't need a circle for that. I don't need a conference call for that. What I need from my allies and co-conspirators is your action. Don't send me a private message in a virtual way and say, oh, girl, you on point. Nuh-uh. Put that energy into the room, my friend, my ally, so you say. If not, please get out my inboxes, get out my DMs, because that's not the action of an ally. And I'm getting to the point that I no longer like to use that word anymore because it's such the flavor of the month. I need co-conspirators. So when I say something, where you at with that assist? I need some Scottie Pippins to my Michael Jordan. come on with the assist. And that way I can be like, bam, that's a slam dunk, right? But I digress.
Kenosha with the visual analogies. I could totally see that. I felt that. That was good stuff right there for sure. Does anyone else want to speak to that? I know maybe Gabriel.
Yeah, I'll be quick. The only thing I was gonna say is, what does being Black in 2022 look like to me? I think one of the things that I was told a few years ago was, and it was around, I was in corporate America and I was trying to move up the corporate ladder and kept running into a lot of obstacles. One of my mentors at that time told me that, being Black, you have to disrupt the stereotypes. And that is something that I wanted to share because it kind of is summed up by all of the things that everybody has already said. But I think it really means that, we all wrestle with stereotypes, whether we are Black or white or whatever. But we also, I feel like as Black individuals, we have a responsibility to disrupt some of those stereotypes that other people may put on us. So they may see me as a shy person or an angry person or someone who's not professional or whatever the case may be. And it is within my ability to disrupt those stereotypes in the minds of others. So, what does that look like? If someone says that, oh, this person is not professional because of the way they dress or the way they wear their hair, then I have the ability to disrupt that and show that I am professional and I can still dress the way that I desire to dress and wear my hair the way I desire to wear my hair. And it doesn't make me any less effective as a leader. And there are so many other ways that we can do that. So I think the things that have already been said also sums up that disrupting the stereotype in the eyes of others. Because up until really 2020, there were so many people who were not listening or not really understanding what it was like to be a Black person in America. And now that we do have some people listening, it's important for us to be able to dismantle some of those negative thoughts that those individuals may have had about Black people that were just wrong. So I think that's important for us in 2022 is to be able to disrupt those stereotypes that others have.
Good stuff, powerful stuff. Disrupting the stereotype, challenging the stereotype, dismantling some of those preconceived notions, how I wear my hair, how I talk, how I dress. Yeah, I'm glad that people are starting to listen. Ebony, I think you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add quickly something else that I feel like it's a space that I've lived in for a long time that I continue to live in is just being a bridge. When you are having one foot in one place, another foot in another place, not that you want to just focus on one side, all the time, focus on the other side. You want to be a bridge sometimes. I have friends that I've grown up with. I have friends, from my college life, from, life before Bemidji. And I also have friends, in Bemidji who don't look like me, friends in Birmingham and all over who don't look like me. And a lot of times those different groups, they don't intersect. So they don't intersect. They don't know what the other group is thinking or what's happening. So sometimes you've got to just be a bridge, so and you are that person who can speak to some of the things that some of your majority culture friends may not get, and even some of your Black friends may not get. So you have to kind of, in 2022, at least for me, is I find myself being a bridge quite often.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And I'm hopeful to other people on this call are learning so much from all of the wisdom that each of you all have shared in this virtual space. I know we're coming up on 3 o'clock, so I'll invite people to put some additional questions in the chat and to check out the chat. There's a lot of stuff going on in there, some podcasts, some book recommendations. So take a peek at that. I have one question that I'm gonna ask to kind of close us out, but continue to put stuff in the chat. Artika, how can we partner better with our BIPOC co-conspirators to get an equal seat at the table for all?
That is a great question. And I would say that, how can we work with our co-conspirators or work with our BIPOC co-conspirators? And it is developing opportunities that will allow us to take on new roles, challenge the status quo, find different lines of business that will support our work, are all things that we can do to work with our co-conspirators to make a change and to do things different.
Beautiful. Challenge the status quo and elevate that. How about Gabriel? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would agree. I think it goes back to what Artika was just saying, but then also what Ebony was saying, and building that bridge. Because oftentimes I think, we talk about a lot of things, but we don't always provide opportunities for us to really engage in the work together. Like even something like what we're doing here today, I think is an opportunity for us to, partner with each other and to build opportunities that hopefully we can go out of this space and be motivated to engage in the work in our own specific circles. And I think for me, it is being willing and available to do some of those things. But going back to Kenosha's point, but it is one of those things where you want to find other individuals that are willing to truly assist and to truly be able to engage in that work. And you're not the only one that is engaging and exerting so much energy while they're sitting on the sidelines. So I definitely agree that opportunities have to be there. We have to sometimes be the initiator of those opportunities and be that bridge, but then also be really engaged in meaningful work.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's that Maya Angelou quote, and of course I'm going to mess it up because I don't have it written down or anything, but something about once we know better, then we do better. And so just having this mindset of continued growth, continued learning, and then making change within our sphere of influence, really going back to our families, going back to our community, places of worship, and making those changes where we have that impact. How about Evette, Kenosha? Do you want to add to that?
Okay, yeah. So for myself, I honestly say, oftentimes we just really need to create those opportunities and be in the community, always open to conversation. I'm a people person by nature. I'm a talker. I will just talk. I may not know your name, but we will talk. And I'm always open. Like I love to just kind of hear, how other people are doing or what, I'm always that encourager, like, oh, well, sure, let's do that. Let's work on it. Oh, you want me to come out there? You're going to give me a tour? Oh, great. Let's do something. And I think a lot of times people are just so apprehensive of doing something or stepping outside of those comfort zones, especially when it is working in those spaces. But we all have our struggles. But if we want to do better, we have to push ourselves out there to make those changes, but in our own comfortable spaces. So you create the change that you're able to create. But for me, I know what I can do or what my capacity is. So I will push myself to just be in those spaces and learn and find ways where I can be part of those spaces and just create things, create those opportunities. Kenosha, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay.
So just to,
Go ahead.
do you want me to just to repeat the question is,
Yeah.
How can we better partner with our BIPOC co-conspirators / what can we do better as a collective?
Well, as I say with all things, it's like having conversations like this today and creating spaces for dialogue But with all conversation and talk, it's like also developing those tangible actions, right? How do we move this from a conversations to actually actions? What are our next steps, and actually putting some accountability behind those next steps. And so that will be my 2 cents on that.
Love that. Stepping outside of our comfort zone, moving from conversations to action. Good stuff. We have about 5 minutes. I'm going to scroll through the chat, but if any of the panelists have anything additional that they'd like to add or bring into this space, please feel free to unmute and do that.
I'll bring some into the space, y'all. One, I want to say thank you to everyone who has joined on behalf of Bemidji State University and Northwest Technical College. We are excited that we got learners, educators, co-conspirators, some folks on that ally spectrum. It's a thing. If I was going to kind of love on Ashley's final question, you all, it's about listening. That's part of it, right? Like, an understanding that, like, we can't heal until we address and identify what we need to heal from, okay? And I think oftentimes, specifically as we progress through time, we forget, right, that there is a lot of destruction, erasure, assimilation, acculturation to humans, specifically BIPOC humans, queer, brothers and sisters, non-binary folks, right, Black humans, etc. There's a lot of damage that's been done that our nation at all levels, macro, meso, and micro, we have not identified. We got to identify those things, name those things, and then let's address those things, okay? That's part of the work. And so where do you find yourself on the spectrum of allyship? Where do you find yourself? And when you find yourself there, make sure that you're ready to go on to the next race. Where the next race at, and how can I amplify that? All right.
I would also say challenge yourself past this conversation that we had. This is just a beginning part. Maybe you participated in other conversations. Where is this going to take you? Make a self-reflection of that and see where are you going to go with the information that you do have now, or that you're getting now. What are you going to do with that? It's all good and well to hear, to listen, but what steps can you take for yourself to create a better tomorrow, especially for those people that identify in that BIPOC space? Because yes, allies, we get to, it's the flavor of the month, like Kenosha said, but what do we do next? Like, what can you do next? We're letting you know what we're doing or how we're doing things, but what can you challenge yourself? How far can you take that conversation? What action can you put into work? But also thank you all for participating or just showing up. Showing up to me, it means a lot, because it's just saying that you're open to that conversation. So thank you for coming. So
I think, Evette, that was a wonderful way to kind of end this, is to encourage people to, this is not a checkbox one and done, to keep the conversation going, think about what your next action steps are. And just in light of it being almost 3, I want to be respectful for folks' time, just create one more opportunity for folks on this panel to speak. Otherwise, I'll close us out here in a good way, but want to give another opportunity for anyone on the panel.
Yes, I just, like to say again, like everyone else, thank you so much for being here, for being present, for caring about this topic. And I'd like to especially thank Evergreen for, just giving me an opportunity to be that representation, to be a light, to lead, to help, move things forward in the organization and as well as in our community. And thanks to Evergreen also for being here. I was really excited. Yesterday, our staff put together a celebration for Black History Month and showed a film and had some food that are traditional, Black family foods. And I just thought that was amazing. So taking away, the information and moving it to action is something that we all want to make sure we're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, just a beautiful way to end today's small piece, knowing that it's still just the beginning. There's more conversations to be had. And I want to say thank you to our amazing panelists, Ebony, Artika, Kenosha, Evette, Gabriel, and Stephen for your bravery in sharing and speaking your authentic, genuine truths. A youth from Cass Lake who maybe might be the Fond du Lac chairman, Eddie Williams, said that bravery is a combination of heart, strength, and good intention. And we need people to stand up against what's been normalized. So I want to elevate his words into the space. Another piece that I want to say is from Audre Lorde. I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal, and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. And so thank you to these amazing panelists for speaking, for verbalizing your thoughts and feelings, for sharing yourselves and your time with the community. Thank you to the attendees for being attentive listeners, asking great questions, sharing great resources in the chat, and for making it a priority to spend your afternoon here with us as we engage in this important conversation. You all have the power to create the future that you are dreaming of. Another quote here from Alice Walker. I'm just full of them today. But the most common way that people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. And so, all power to the people, sort of thing. And to breath and making some snaps. So we'll do the one breath and then some snaps. Ready, get ready, unmute, take a collective breath. And then breathe out and show me some snaps, some claps. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, a lovely Friday, a relaxing weekend with some good food, some nourishing, tasty water, maybe get in a hearty nap. And stay tuned to Bemidji State University's event calendar for hopefully some more great opportunities for continued learning. Miigwech for coming and Giga Wabaman, Minuwa.